Okay, I used the wrong intro, but that's okay. No big deal. I want to welcome everybody to Real Estate Talk TGIF. This is episode 108. That's 108. We've done 106 weeks in a row with 108 total shows. I want to welcome my special guest today from Connecticut, Jared James. Jared, welcome, and thanks so much for coming on, man.
Of course, man. I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to a good conversation.
Awesome. Great. So this is, like I said, this is Real Estate Talk TGIF episode 108. Jared, do you know what TGIF stands for?
I have a feeling that you're going to tell me it's something different. Obviously, we think of Thank God It's Friday, and I'm sure everybody says that to you. I don't know. Too good at Facebook? I don't know.
No, it's Thank God It's Finale.
There you go. Gotcha.
Oh, I mean, it was right there, man. I mean, it was a layup. I gave.
And now I know how to say your last name because I was wondering how to say that correctly. So now I know. Yep.
No, so it's like, okay, so it's people know it by Thank God It's Finale, and here we are. It's also Friday, so it does work, right?
It does, yeah.
And the name just came 108 episodes ago. Why, I don't know. So anyway, Jared, you've been in real estate for a good number of years. You've had all kinds of experiences, and today you're one of the top coaches in the country. You have your own marketing company. You're an entrepreneur. Talk to me. How did you get from starting in real estate? What made you do that, and then made you turn completely into a coach in what you're doing now? What's your path look like?
It's never something like, second grade career day when little Johnny wants to be an astronaut. You say that you're gonna, one day get paid to speak and train and, whatever. That was never the intention. I actually, I think this is where people miss it sometimes. Like, I get messages all the time from people and they're like, I'm going to do what you're doing. I can't wait to do what you're doing. And I think sometimes when we focus too far around the corner, we don't focus enough on what we're doing right now. And then we lose the ability to create credibility that ultimately allows us to do the next thing in our life. And I think that's why I got to where I am now is that, I was selling real estate. I mean, I'm a lifelong entrepreneur, but I was selling real estate. Real estate really allowed me to flex those entrepreneurial muscles. And I was fully focused on real estate. I was never thinking, this is a means to move on to something. I was never thinking about, doing, working with top companies and training. And I was never thinking about any of that. I was just working on being, the best agent I could be. And I'd won a lot of awards and that kind of stuff. And I just started getting asked by people if I would come and talk at their event. And I didn't even know that was an option, for a kid that grows up that half the time everybody's telling you to shut up every time you're talking. I'm like, you mean you can actually people ask you to come and talk and they pay you and they, and so I just started getting asked and then, I'm skipping a lot of details, but things went well, one after another. Then, more and more invites started coming and then they started saying, what would you charge to come? And I had no idea, how that even works. But I'm probably not the typical, it's funny because when I first started doing it, we think that people get annoyed when people get on stage and they sell. And what I found early on was that people get equally annoyed when you have nothing to sell. Meaning I was getting up and I would do this and, they'd get motivated and it would work. And I'd be talking about real strategies because I've actually done this. I've sat across the dining room table. I've worked with buyers and sellers. And then people would be coming up being like, so how do I get into coaching? How do I get into training? How do I, And I'm like, I don't have any of that, and people would legitimately get annoyed. And I was kind of like, oh, shoot, I should have something. So we started something. And I'll be honest, man, our programs early on, man, they sucked. I didn't know what I was doing. I think we were the first company that did virtual training. I'll tell you that. We did that way back when before anybody was doing it. But my God, was it bad. I mean, we just didn't know what we were doing, And then little by little, you figure it out. It's like any good entrepreneur, right? You figure it out. You say yes and figure out how later. And that's what we did. And little by little, we did that. And we started building infrastructure and started building a following and started building relationships with top brands. And just little by little, I remember the moment because I remember looking up to top speakers and coaches in our industry. And I just remember thinking, how does that happen? Because you idolize them on such a level, you'd get around them and you're just like, my God, they're this icon, they're this, whatever. And then I vividly remember the moment when I was, when things were starting to pick up and I was getting invited by these major companies to come be on the main stage and our numbers were growing and our, all this stuff. And I vividly remember having dinner one night with my wife and saying, oh, I see how it happens now. I completely see how it happens, right? Like I started seeing it happen.
Right.
And that was kind of a wake up call for me, because that was never the intention. You know what I mean? Like that was not, to this day, being completely honest, many times I'll get off, like I'm a natural introverted person. So what you see on stage, what you see on social, what you see on whatever is me flipping the switch, because that's a part of me, no doubt. But my favorite place in the world is the hotel room, And so there's many times where I will get off of a stage in front of a major audience, thousands of people, and it legitimately, if I didn't have an event booked for the next day and the next day and the next day, in my head, I legitimately go, I'm never doing this again. Like I'm done. I'm retiring. I'm just going to go,
Really?
And that legitimately happens. I have that conversation in my head, and it's because it was never my intention. It was never my goal to be, a figure in our industry, to be an entrepreneur. Like it was never like that. I was just trying to be great at what I was doing at the time.
Well, that's really cool. I've always, when I was growing up, for me, it was like, I was the shy guy, I was always shy, and people say, you? I said, yeah. I mean, basically I am introverted to a point. I guess I've kind of gone from the introvert to the extrovert, but one of the things I tell people is that I always had to do things differently. Yeah. I always did them alone, did them differently. So I had to work on that. So part of what I train and coach and do is everything. I try to be as different as possible. And it kind of like rubs some people the wrong way simply because I do say what I think. Right. And people want me to be all kinds of politically correct and all that other crap. And sorry, just not going to do it.
Well, that's the world. That's the world we live in right now. I call it groupthink, which is really, the word think shouldn't even be in it, because people have lost the ability to think. Like it's just, I was joking around on something the other day. I think I did a podcast or something or something. I forget what it was. It was either our podcast or another one. And I said, we've lost the ability to have new facts and change our mind. Like it's like, what happened to that? Like we basically dig our heels in the ground and say, this is what and no matter what happens, this is what it is. And we've lost the ability to actually search after truth. We're more interested in being right from the beginning than we are in actually knowing what the truth of things are. And it's sad, because I think people are needed in our world right now to think, to come from the right place, to not be a biased, freak, whatever, but like to really search truth and look at facts and look at data and, stop just buying into whatever the news media decides is their latest, point that's going to get them ratings. It's just amazing to me how many people right now say that they don't trust the media, they don't trust they don't trust all these things, but then whatever is put out on a mass scale, they believe in and they fight for. And I'm like, well, which one is it? Do you trust? Do you not trust? Do you think for yourself? Do you, we live in a weird world right now that if you think for yourself, you're somehow anti whatever the other thing is. And it's just like, what are you talking about? I'm not anti. I'm just thinking this is what the facts are. Like,
you said the crowd think, which is really interesting. I think people sometimes are afraid to have an opinion. They're afraid to, think their own way and what's really, I think, just we're talking about this with society and stuff. I think that the horrible thing of our society is that, if someone has a different opinion than you do, there's a lot of people that have broken friendships because of it. And I don't, that's ridiculous. I mean, there's a lot of people that I don't agree with as far as, their thoughts on politics or right. Thoughts on how to dial a phone. I really don't give a shit what it is. I mean, it's like, I don't care what their thoughts are. They're my friend for a reason. And if we can have a conversation about it, great. If we can't, that's great too. It doesn't matter, right?
Difference of opinion is a great thing, man. That's the only way you learn. I mean, we live in a world right now. I can't remember if I tweeted this out or not, but like sometimes on Twitter I'll put things out that I won't put out in other places. But like we live in a world right now where people are more concerned with not looking racist than they are actually being racist. Like they're more concerned with not saying the wrong words, that right. Not saying the wrong trigger, whatever, than they are with actually being a good person. And that's what happens in a cancel culture. That's what happens in a society where if anybody steps out of the line of what the group narrative is, then you must be just so wrong. It's ridiculous. And the truth is, we live in a world where things are not as black and white, as left and right, as, whatever, as they appear to be. Like when you're a thinker, usually a whole idea is not completely correct. There's some truths to it. There's some not truths to it. There's some, and it takes a thinker to really understand that. But unfortunately, we're in a world right now where, my God, if you don't buy all the way in on the latest thing that'll be gone next week, by the way, but this is the latest fad, then you're somehow a crazy, it's just, man, I started turning off the news and turning off because it's funny. I walk around the world and I interact with people, all over the globe. In the last week, I've been on, we're doing trainings in Brazil and Portugal and Spain and the US and Canada and all these different places. And my interactions with people is people are generally they're good. It's 2020. People, if you're a jerk, they don't like you. But for the most part, people are kind of good. They're, and then I turn on the TV and I'm like, oh, that's right. Everyone hates each other and we're going to die. And I'm just this is not the reality I'm living in day to day, but then I'm reminded of it as soon as, it's weird, man. It's crazy. It's no good for people. It legitimately is no good for people. When you look at the number one reason why people succeed, number one reason, ability to control, ability to manage their own state of mind. And we believe these things and we love to read them on Instagram, we love to see those quotes. But in our everyday, what we're actually doing, people aren't necessarily living it. They're feeding the chemicals in their body that love strife, that love conflict, that love, and for me, I don't know, man. I don't. It's not how I live. It's not legitimately how I live in my world. In my my interactions with people, in the way that I think about things. I don't look to MSNBC or Fox News to tell me how I feel about something. I actually go and think about it, and I look at data, and
the way I look at it too is that I'm always in a learning phase. I'm never. Okay, so you can say you're this way or you're this way, whatever it is, but I'm still in a learning phase all the time. I mean, you used the word a second ago, what's the latest fad and everything else. And I look at what we're in and what we're living through. I don't think we're in a fad. I think we're in something that's going to be around for a little while. And I think the biggest mistake one can make is to, I don't know if you're familiar with this thing called the Stockdale paradox, which is from Admiral Stockdale.
Right.
Who was a POW. They looked at the brutal facts of the day, right? I think that's one of the things we really need to do is look at that and to not be to be flexible, to be malleable, to be able to change what we're doing, turn on a dime, to use the old expression. As far as the real estate business, would you agree that we're not in a fad, that we're actually in a change?
What do you mean, a change in what way? We're always changing, but a change in what way?
Well, I mean, look, 6 months ago, we were worried about what our presentation was going to look like. Okay. Right. Our presentation, I don't think has changed, but how we do our presentation has changed. It's just like my feeling on the real estate business, right? I don't think anything's changed over the past 40 years. It's just how we do it has changed.
Sure. Right? I call that marry the principle, date the model. Principles are tried and true. The idea of get in front of a client before your competitor at the time that the client needs you is a principle that remains true forever. You got to marry that thing. That's an idea that's always there. But you date the model. You date the strategy. I love that, man. So now you're not getting in front of people by calling the phone book. Now there's other strategies to do it in today's world, So I call that marry the principle, date the model. And it's absolutely true. What's true is always true, but how we do things can absolutely change. I do think, though, even with what you're talking about right now, I do think that people have gone a little bit over the deep end with the whole Corona thing right now, that it's now going to change the industry forever. I do not believe that at all. And I'll explain to you what I mean. We are such prisoners of the moment. I remember after 9/11 when nobody was going to get on planes again. Okay. I remember after Y2K when everyone was going to die and computers weren't going to work. And I remember in 2010 when all the media did was cover shark attacks and nobody was going to get in the ocean again. And I remember right now how everybody over a temporary virus that we've had viruses before, we'll have viruses again. It's a temporary thing. It's not a full time. Now, will it change some of how we do business? Did consumers become more comfortable with video and technology? Absolutely. Does it mean that we're now never going to do showings in person and we're now never going to meet? That's ridiculous. Like, that's the thing that changes our industry. That's the reason why our industry has not become only app-based, because people need to feel what it's like to be in a home. They need to, this is why people say don't show them anything less than 2 full baths, and then they buy a 1.5 bath house because they walked in and it felt like home. This idea that when this is all over, we're still going to stay away from each other. I mean, the worst thing you can do to a prisoner is throw them in the hole, isolation. So when this is all over, like all of a sudden we're going to isolate everywhere. It's utter I don't believe that at all. I think that there will be some upgrades to technology, that there'll be more of an adoption of technology. There'll be an awareness of, but I mean, the idea that how we have to do business right now, when this is over, we're going to keep doing it. I don't believe that at all.
I agree with you. And the way I look at it is this, and people are talking about different markets. People are looking at Manhattan. They're looking at Northern New Jersey. We're from that area, right? You look all over the country that, you know, there are companies that have decided that, okay, we're not going to go into the office for another couple of months yet. You know, there's companies in the Midwest. My daughter it works for one of them in Tennessee, where they've been ordered back to their offices 4 weeks ago, right? Everything is fine there. They're nervous about it, but they're there. But you look at companies, I believe Twitter has said no more offices, right? And you've got other companies that are saying the same thing.
Shocker, Twitter. Yeah. Okay.
I believe there's going to be like a boomerang effect where people are going to pull back and they say, wait a minute. We're not getting the production we need. We need to get back to the office. We're seeing it with education, and we're going to see it everywhere else.
Education's a joke right now. I mean, my kids went through the virtual learning, like, whoever they get as a teacher next year is going to have some catching up to do. Because look, man, it is very industry specific. Let's not act like this won't change things from the perspective of, yes, office space is going to be at less demand now, because there's no doubt. Look, it's from industry to industry, office to office, meaning that there are offices right now who had 6 different locations who can now use coronavirus as an excuse to say, hey, we're coming down to 2. Because it wasn't needed. You know, this did expose the fact that there were a lot of people who didn't need to be in an office. There are a lot of workers who don't need to be in an office. That is going to scale back commercial, by the way. But then there's other offices like mine where we found we needed to be in the office. Like, we have a lot of young workers. We have a lot of like they need the environment and the people around and the, you know, so it's going to be case by case basis. But there's no doubt that a result of this is less office space. Like, there's no way around it. The question becomes, from a real estate perspective, what does that mean for real estate? Because that office space now that won't get filled, because there will be some now, since demand will be lower, that won't be filled, what's it going to get turned into? Because it's not going to be retail. Amazon killed that. You know, the only thing not going down right now is the population, especially after Corona, everybody being locked up. And so I think a lot of that office space is actually going to get turned into residential. It's going to get turned into condos. It's going to get turned into apartments. It's going to get turned into, because it's got to get turned into something, right? So there's no doubt long term, when you say, did this change everything? In that sense, it did, because a lot of people realized they didn't need everyone in, or they didn't need as many offices as they had, or they didn't need as much space as they had, or they didn't need, no doubt about it. Like that's definitely going to be a shift. And you're already seeing it right now. Like, as much as the residential market right now is booming, like, you know, commercial is not in a good place right now. Like,
no, it's not. No, it's
if you're
not.
a commercial agent, I got asked this on a thing I was doing the other day, and he's like, Jared, I hear all this stuff, whatever. I'm a commercial agent. What about me? And I'm like, you're not going to like my answer. Like, I have to be truthful. Commercial is not a great space right now. And just for obvious reasons. It's just facts. It's just data, right? Like, facts and data matter. You know, it's, you know, I did a counter video yesterday to Susie Orman, who came out and said, don't buy a house right now. I'd wait, right? Now, look, I'm not
I saw that video. I loved it. I loved it.
And look, I'm not one of these people that think someone can't have an opinion. I love opinions. And I'm not bashing her personally. It was just financially irresponsible.
Absolutely.
When you look at, if people actually wait, what it's going to do to them. And believe me, I'm the first guy. I can't stand it when coaches teach people, no matter what, is it a great time to buy? Yes. Is it a great time to sell? Yes. Like, you lose your authority. You lose your credibility when you're just saying yes all the time. This was financially irresponsible because, again, I believe in facts and data. They matter.
Right.
Everything's not just emotion. Everything's not just data matters. What is, like, what's real.
Right. And what she did and talked about was a lot different than when, you heard a few years ago, Grant Cardone said, buying a house is a terrible investment. But he has a qualification as to what he's talking about and why, right?
Oh, Dave, can I say something about that? Because here's a perfect example. Grant Cardone, and I chatted back and forth with Grant about this, and Gary Vee said the same thing, right? They said buying a home's a terrible investment. So guys, hear me out, because I know that we have a lot of real estate people that listen to me and listen to whatever. So hear me out. Don't listen to the first line and then go, now I hate Jared, okay? Because I came back and combated that as well, okay? Like I did a podcast on it. I talked about what Gary Vee said. Guys, understand from the pure numbers of it, for someone in Grant Cardone's or Gary Vaynerchuk's position, they were right. Like, they were actually right from their position.
Exactly.
Because they're looking at it and saying, if I buy a home for $500,000, I end up, because, my wife wants me to upgrade this, upgrade that, upgrade whatever. Now, by it's all said and done, over the course of 10 years, I put $300,000 in. Now I'm up to $800,000. On that $500,000, I'm actually going to pay back 800 and something. So really, I'm in over $1 million on this home that I eventually sell for $560, And for them, they're like, wait, I could take that $500,000, go put it into a tech company, and that $500,000 turns into $20 million. Like, that's a better use of my investment. So from their perspective, what they said was accurate. For 99.999% of the population, again, financially irresponsible to say that. Because when you look at not just how the numbers work out, but the amount of wealth that is accrued by a person's life over their lifetime, and you look at how much disposable cash people have, which is almost nothing, it's built-in savings. Like, all of their wealth later on in life, almost all of it comes from their home equity. Okay. Like, that's where, so for 99.999% of the population, yes, while you could make an argument that you can take that money, invest it somewhere else and get a greater return, people aren't sitting around saving 50 grand a year. They're living paycheck to paycheck to paycheck to paycheck. And the home, when it all comes down to it, is forced savings. So and I had this conversation with Grant, and I'm like, dude, I get it, man. But, for you're speaking your truth, but you got to understand, most people are not sophisticated enough to determine, to decipher between those two and say, yeah, it is right for him, but it's terrible for the majority of the public. They should be investing in homes.
Right. Absolutely. That's exactly where I wanted you to take it. I not wanted you to take it, but I thought you would take it there, because what was said recently by good old Susie was just like completely and totally.
Look, take Susie's advice and wait. In the meantime, you're still paying someone's mortgage while you're renting. You're just not paying your own. So, like, why would you ever? And let's not even get into, forget about the data and the facts and all that kind of stuff. Let's get into culturally. Do I want to live in a neighborhood where everybody rents, or do I want to live in a neighborhood where everybody owns? Because how do they take care of that home differently when they own? Okay. Look, I love mowing my lawn. I'm not going to mow someone else's. See what I'm saying? Right. The reason I love it is because of the ownership, the pride I have, what it does for your personality, what it does, for the meaning you give yourself, what it does for the value you give yourself, that you own a piece of this. There is something that it does to the culture to have an ownership mentality that you don't get by renting every single. Now look, Grant Cardone and them, they don't need that in their personality. They own other things. But for the majority of the public, right, ownership matters. This is what's being missed right now with all the cultural stuff going on, and with all the Black Lives Matters and this one matters and that one matters and everything else. Forget all the arguments back and forth. One thing that we all need to look at as a society within every culture is, how do we create more ownership? Because when you look at what comes from that ownership, when you look at what it does for your familial structure, when it does for your mentality, what it does for your future wealth, what it does for the ownership mentality matters. Like, we want people to own. So even though I can prove it from a data perspective and I can prove it from a numbers perspective, There's another part that you can't really prove, which is just culturally, again, would you want to live in a neighborhood where everybody rents, or would you want to live in a neighborhood where everybody owns? That's a crucial question when talking about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you talk about, you mowing lawn. I mean, I've done that my entire life. It gets to a point where I tell people now, it takes me longer to start my lawnmower than it does to cut my grass. I have such a small piece, but I choose to do that. I choose the value of ownership and doing it myself.
Come on, man. There's something about seeing those lines in the lawn when you're done. Yes. You know what I'm saying? There's something about that smell. There's something about that thing in your head that says, this is mine. I take care of this. Like you know what I'm saying? Like
I do.
It's no different than, look, man, like I feel better when my car is clean. You know what I mean? Like someone asked me the other day, they're like, what makes you happy? Like what makes you, and of course there's all the standard answers. I want to be with my family. I want to do duh, right? But you know what really makes me happy? When there's a piece in my fridge that was broke and it came and got fixed. Like I'm like, check, the world is in order. Like that's the kind of stuff that makes me happy, is when things are in order, when they're how they should be and they're working like they should be, and it's one of my oddities, I guess. I don't know.
It's just like me with this year. I always worked from home and I've got offices to go to, but this year, for some reason, I decided that there are like 4 or 5 things around the house that I hated, and I just never took the time to do. I did them, right? And it's like I sit back and said, yeah, I like that.
Isn't there something? It's like a chemical release. It's like some people go to drugs, but you can literally just fix something in your house or fix something that's out of order in your life, or whatever. Like it literally just releases these chemicals where you're just like, the world makes sense. Like it now, it's crazy, but it's true.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. And I think we could call it order, right? I mean, if we could call it one thing, it would have to be order, because it's in our heads. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing in our businesses. It's the same thing as being an entrepreneur and investor, So let's talk a little bit about.
By the way, on that same note, that's why I'm one of the few people, like, just weirdly, I like to pay my bills. Like I look forward to every month paying my bills, and I think it's because like I think everybody in my position, they didn't have a lot of money growing up and everything else. There's something in my world. There's something in the alignment. There's something in the structure and the order of it that goes, yep, I'm in right standing. Paid my bills. I did. You know what I mean? It's just, it's all part of that same psyche.
Yeah. Well, I use the profit first theory from Mike Michalowicz, who's been a guest on this show. The 10th and the 25th. That's when I sit down. I do everything I got to do. I get through it. I actually schedule it every month. It's on my schedule.
Yep.
I call it Bills Day, 9 to 11, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I get it done.
Yeah.
And
my wife says to me all the time, she's like, because she sees how crazy I am, and she's like, just let me take over the finances for the house. Let me take over the bills. And there's a lot of things I give up, but I'm like, no, that's not one of them, because there's something about it I just enjoy. I feel like I'm winning at life when I pay those bills. You know what I mean? Like the
I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. So to win at real estate, I'm sure we have some agents that will watch this, that we're watching it, that are watching now. If there was one thing or 5 things that agents need to really do from Jared James, if you had this crystal ball of what they really need to do from start to growth, what would that be?
Okay. Well, we don't have enough time to cover the whole thing they should do, but from the perspective of, if I could take them right from the start, first, I say it all the time, you run a business or you run around, right? We don't look at this industry. We don't look at this business like a business enough. And, it's because we don't learn it. It's kind of like going to school to prepare for life. You don't really learn anything in school that prepares you for life. Like, we don't learn finances, balance, whatever. Like, it's the same thing when it comes to real estate. It's the same thing to running a business, right? So people get off to bad habits right off the bat because they watch the top producer in their office just basically run around like a chicken with their head cut off, and they're successful. And so they're like, well, I guess that's what you do, right? So right off the bat, like, my advice always to people when I talk about the biggest mistake people make is that they don't understand that our industry is ultimately about boats over fishing. Okay. It's more about the boats than it is about the fishing. And what I mean about that is that, you know, everybody wants to come in and fish. They want to create leads. They're just thinking business, short term. And the problem is you're always going to catch those fish, but you'll never actually do it at a level that you could without the infrastructure it takes. You know, if you want to catch more fish, if you want to catch bigger fish, you got to have a bigger boat, right? I always say you don't go shark fishing in a canoe. And so the mistake people make early on is they don't build the boat first. Infrastructure first. Like we have a marketing company, Jarja Media, and we started a department last year, which is like the greatest thing we ever did, where we started offering transaction coordinators, and it's like incredible. Like it's blowing up because I tell everybody, whether you're day one in the industry or day 20,001, you have to have a transaction coordinator. There's no risk. You only pay if they close. You only the personality profile of a transaction coordinator is completely different than that of an agent. Okay. And so while an agent's coming in and they're being told that they're supposed to be everything to everyone, and you know, I'm a great negotiator, I'm a great marketer, I'm a great communicator, I'm a great transaction coordinator, no, you're a great bull crapper. Like unless you're schizophrenic, you're not great at all those things, right?
No, you're not.
So right off the bat, let's take the thing that makes me great as an agent is what makes me terrible at managing transactions. Because I'm not a checkbox next type of person, okay? Task orient, you know, whatever. So the greatest piece of advice I'd give without talking for 8 hours about what agents should be doing in today's world or any world from the start and on is understand it's boats before fishing. Create your infrastructure first. Hire your TC, get them ready. Get your CRM set up. I know you don't like having one. I know it goes against your personality, but a real estate business without a fully functioning CRM is a car without wheels. You know, you're not going anywhere. It's really that simple. Okay. And so I would just, for a simple, quick answer, boats before fishing. You know, we've got videos on YouTube, how to build a team, how to whatever. You can go watch them. It's all free. We've got podcasts out on it. You can check all that stuff out. It's free. Boats before fishing. Create the infrastructure first. Don't go shark fishing in a canoe. Okay. Don't wait till you're too busy to finally catch up and put in the infrastructure that you need. Like boats before fishing, infrastructure, then go fishing.
But it's the same thing. It's the same thing. There's a difference between a good agent and a great agent. That's a great process, right? You've got the process along with this. You put the process in the CRM, right? And the system works. It's just like the New York subway system, right? It's a system, and they've got processes to get it all taken together and put it all together. You know, they didn't build that without all that in mind. And how
Dave, I would argue they're both great agents. One is just performing way better because if you ask their clients, their clients probably both say that they're great agents. So it's not that they're a good or a great agent. They're both great agents. One just has process and one doesn't. One gets to realize their potential and the other one doesn't. So the difference is that the one you're calling the good agent is dealing with 30 people who all think they're a great agent. And the other one who's got process is dealing with 300 people who all think they're a great agent. It's just a matter of how much of your potential do you want to fill? How much of your life do you want to live, right? I said this last year and it's so true. We buy into this idea that, you know, we all get the same 24 hours in a day. We all get the same. That's utter bull crap. Like, Elon Musk has the same 24 hours that you do. It's just a nice way of making you feel bad because he's doing so much more. But it's not because he has the same 24 hours that we have. You get the number of hours according to the infrastructure you create. Okay. So Elon Musk has thousands of employees. That's why he can get more done, right? If I've got 40 something people on the payroll, I've got 1,100 hours to your 24. Okay. It's about your process. It's about the infrastructure you create. It's not about we all get the same 24 hours. No, we don't. We get the number of hours according to the infrastructure we create, period.
I love that. I love that because it's always like, you know, what are you doing with the time that you have to use? You know, I mean, one of the things that you've intimated is one of the things that we talk about in our coaching is that you need to be more of an entrepreneur, more of the investor when you start your business rather than come in with that employee mindset.
Right.
Right.
That's what most people do, by the way. They get into real estate and because they don't want a boss, and then they just basically build the prison around themselves, and they're more entrapped than when they were before they were in real estate. You know, oh, I want flexibility of schedule. Good luck. You know, like
no, and the whole thing is they want to come in, they want this, they want that, and they don't understand that, hey, guess what? You're in your own business now.
I wrote a book called Get Out of Your Way, you know, and it's that basic idea, you know, it's the idea that most of our issues are not, you know, it's not the industry, it's not the market, it's not the coworkers, it's not your broker, it's not your spouse, it's not your whatever. Who's the common denominator in every single situation? You are. And here's the thing, when you start to think like that, I had another video I did a couple years ago where I said, you know, the world becomes much easier when you come to the conclusion that everything is my fault. You know, because even when it's not your fault, at least I have power over it to change it. But when you live as a victim and everything is someone else's fault, it's the climate, it's the economy, it's this, it's my family, it's yes, awesome. You get to be a victim. But in every single one of those situations, you lose. So unless you want to keep losing, come to the conclusion that everything is my fault and now I can fix it. It's a much better place to come from.
Well, it's also, I mean, it's the same thing as you need to take responsibility for everything that really happens, because if you think about it, everything happens because of what you do and where you are and how you run your day,
and how you perceive it. Like, meaning matters. The meaning you assign to something ultimately matters, right? Like, two people can have the exact same thing happen to them, and one of them assigns a meaning that is, well, that's because they don't like me and whatever. And another one assigns the meaning of, oh, I've got to communicate better because and the meaning that you assign is ultimately going to determine how you act. So if you see the world as a victim, if you see the world as then the meaning that you're always going to assign is that somehow this one's against you and this one's not working because of that person and this one's, and great, if you want to live that way, understand, I'm not telling you can't live like that. Go for it. Just don't complain when you continually lose. Okay? Because that's what comes from that.
It's like what I learned from my longtime coach, John Cheplack, who said, be a witness, not a judge. Right. I mean, right. You're judging what other people are doing and you're assuming other stuff that people are doing. Right. And when somebody says something, you take it personally. Like, there's two things I look at, right? I look at that, and that's really hard to remember sometimes, right? Yeah. But then I look at a great book. You mentioned a book, Get Out of Your Way, which reminds me of a lot of things, but I'm thinking about a book called The Four Agreements, which I'm sure you've heard about, right? Yep. It's be true to your word, take nothing personally, make no assumptions, and do your best, right? The two middle ones, they're really hard. Yeah. Really hard. But if you remember not to judge everything you look at and just witness it and take it in, those two middle ones of not taking things personally and not making assumptions become a little bit easier. Yeah. Right. It goes back to the story when you say get out of your way. A buddy of mine in Georgia, he noticed that his business took off once he decided that he had to get out of his own way, right, and let his business go. How do you suggest people actually get out of their own way?
Well, you and I talked beforehand. You were talking about how you have a VA and everything, right? And I'm not talking about a VA hospital. I'm talking about like a virtual assistant, right? Right. When you look at the stuff that I've already said, get a TC right away. Right. You know, a great way to start into getting an assistant is to start with a VA. The reason why is because not just because you want them to do well for you, but it's actually a way for you to kind of dip your toe in the water and start to realize that delegation is a good thing. You know, what makes people successful in this industry and in business in general is many times the very thing that will keep them from going to the next level. Meaning that drive, that determination, that put your head down and go is exactly what gets you to a certain level in business. But it's exactly what will keep you from going to the next level, because now you're going to kill everybody around you that tries to come into your space and is trying to help you and is trying to. And so one of the ways sometimes that you can get around that is that you can start to do these minor hires, you know, like a TC, like a VA, where you can actually start to see what it's like to delegate, see what it's like to get away from the inner narratives you create. Like, oh, they're doing it wrong. Well, they're not doing it wrong. They're doing it different than you. That doesn't mean it's wrong. The real thing you need to look at is, oh, look at that. It's getting done and I had nothing to do with it. Wow. Like, now that's an example of when you make those kinds of hires, you actually start to get out of your own way, because you start to create a new reality where you're like, wow, that actually works. And oh my God, I can see how that, and by the way, I had to do these kinds of things because I can be as controlling as, the next person, right? But if I continue to do that, or I didn't allow people to, we do a thing, in our office, #own it, to just own what it is that they're doing and live with the mistakes that they make and not be like a rule over it, like, what the heck is that? And that's, whatever, then we could never grow, right? Ultimately, when you look at getting out of your own way and you look at, delegating and doing that kind of stuff, when you hire the right people, the best thing that can ever happen is that they make mistakes. Because if you hire the right person, that mistake is a teachable moment, where now they're gonna be like, okay, that's how that's done. Like, you have to allow people to be what it is you hired them to be. Like, if you just hired idiot minions who only do what you say, well, then don't get surprised when that's what they act like. But if you hire smart people, people who can think for themselves, people who are creative, people who are, sometimes their result is going to come outside of what your perception of what it should have been is. And that's okay. Like, that's actually a really good thing. Now you're adding to yourself rather than just trying to expand the limits of yourself, if that makes any kind of sense.
It makes an awful lot of sense. And it's like you said, you have to allow them to make mistakes. I remember when I would hire an admin or an assistant or whatever it was, and I would tell them, I says, look, you just need to listen, do as I ask, and listen to me, listen to how I handle things. Because ultimately what you want is someone that can do things differently, but understands your thought process. Right. And do that by listening, right?
You set culture, you set culture, you set direction, you set, whatever. But at the end of the day, once you set that, it's like raising your kids, right? Like, there's a time when I tell my kids, this is what you wear. There's a time when we walk into a house and we walk into the man of the house and I say, you go say hello, and you look him in the eye and you shake his hand. There's a time when I have to give a lot of yeses and nos to my children. But as they start to get older, right, if they're not able to kind of go off by themselves, make good decisions, think a certain way based on the way that I've taught them as they're growing and whatever, then I haven't done my job. Like, there has to be a part where you take that bird and let them go out of the nest, and you have to trust what it is that you've tried to instill in them for so many years. And running a company is no different.
It's just amazing. We've got some nice comments coming up from Pete Kopech. Great things there. Red Staffstrom, Ken Adamo, Ada Doyle. We've got some great stuff coming up. Just talking about getting out of your own way, owning things, what you're doing is just like, it's just actually absolutely amazing. And having the reality of doing things a certain way, like shaking hands, I hope we can get back to that someday.
Of course, we're going to get back to that.
Right, exactly. Right. I played golf a couple of weeks ago, and at the end, you shake everybody's hand. I only played with another guy. I shook his hand. I said, "You have no idea how good this feels." Right.
When I had my first handshake last week, and I was just like, I was ready to marry the person. I was just like, a handshake. Like it's crazy. Yeah.
So talk to me about the different things that we talk about. A lot of things. That has been a great conversation. Talk to me about the things you've got going on. We know about your coaching, but you just talked about a marketing company. Talk to me about your marketing company and what you got going with that, and what you're helping people with. Helping people is what it's all about, man. And you've got some other things you're doing aside from your coaching. So talk to me about that.
So that grew from that, man. So we built our coaching company. We're still building our coaching company. We've got, students all over the world. We work with a ton of major brands. We've got, a good following and such. But the marketing side came from demand. We started trying to teach our students different ways to market, different ways to use internet marketing, different ways. And many of them just weren't familiar with that, or that just wasn't their best use of time. I can make a coffee or I can stop at Dunkin' Donuts. And sometimes it makes more sense to stop at Dunkin'. It's not that I can't make it. It's just a use of time, right? So I was like, shoot, we could do this for people. And so years ago, I started hiring marketing people and we started doing it. And then, I was sending thousands of people off to various CRMs. And I'm like, we can do this. We can do this better. I should have control over this. And so, invested, over $1 million in years of my own life. And we built our own CRM. And we built this whole thing off on a separate company called Jarja Media, which supports the industry and then also supports our students. All of our students get the CRM for free. But then obviously we sell it to the industry, that kind of a thing. And then, last year, I'm looking at, we changed our organizational structure for real estate teams. And it used to be admin first. And I'm like, man, this is a different world we live in now. It's TC first now. Like, that's your first. There's no risk. You only pay if they close the deal. If not, you don't pay anything. When you're more busy, you'll pay more. When you have no deals, you don't pay anything. And I was like, why can't we do that? Like, why can't we offer that? So I hired a person or two, and I was like, let's just give it a shot. Let's see how it goes. And it absolutely took off. It was like, this is amazing. Like, this is, and so the entrepreneurial side of me looks at what our people needs. And many times I look at things and go, we could offer that, but we're not going to, because it's not a good fit. And then there's things within, our sister company, Jarja Media, where I'm like, let's do that. And what that's given me the ability to do is when things change in the industry, I'm not calling some owner of a CRM and saying, can we change this in the system? Here's what it needs to be. I have a meeting with our developers, and I'm like, this is what we need to do. Get it done. When something came up, like, the TC thing, and I'm like, we can do this better. It's not like I'm going to someone saying, can we do this? The entrepreneurial spirit in me says, I'll put the investment forward. Let's do it. And honestly, if it didn't show fruit, I'd cut it. But it did, So, that all came from demand. That came from, a guy that was an agent, like so many people listening, but I always thought from the entrepreneurial perspective. I was like, how can we do this? How can we do this better? Am I willing to invest? Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Everybody wants to have the results, but like, there's a lot of risk involved. When this whole COVID things hits and you've got huge overhead and huge payroll and huge, that's when you find out if you really believe in yourself.
Sure.
That's when you find out if you're just a kid wearing a hoodie living in his parents' basement, or if you're actually an entrepreneur. And I strive for that stuff, man. I love that stuff. Like, it's how I'm built. I wouldn't function in a normal, like, even like you look at the people who work at our office, right? Their hours are, although they've got to do some stuff after hours many times, but they're required to be in the office 8:45 to 5 o'clock, right? Mm-hmm. I personally don't think like that at all. Like, I've got 24 hours in a day for myself personally. And, sometimes they come at 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Sometimes it comes from whatever, but like, I'm always kind of on and thinking and doing stuff. And, I operate a little bit differently. Sometimes I have to leave the office and go like do content, get away from everybody, just think and do content and do, you got to know who you are. But anyway, so yeah, we've got the coaching side, we've got the marketing software side, and who knows what'll come in the future. We'll see.
So the CRM, that's not something that's easy to do. Did you build it off of something else, or is it just something you?
Yeah. So, and I see the thing you just put up there. It's actually Red. It looks like you got a typo there, man. It's actually jarjamedia.com. It not an E, not JARJE. It's JARJA media.com. But man, I just kind of like, when I looked at how important CRMs are, and then I looked at how most of them were built based on the old ACT program. I don't know if you remember the old ACT database.
Yes.
But I looked at it and I said, hey, they're not really built for our industry, meaning usually you've got multiple transactions going on at one time. When you look at things like drip campaigns, they're awesome. But like, if you have a 6-month drip campaign on, and perfect, and all of a sudden, you're 5 months in, the person hasn't responded. They finally respond, some lead. And then a week later, your drip campaign sends out and goes, hey, still haven't heard from you. You just killed that relationship. Absolutely. Like, your drip campaign should be able to stop once you make contact. You shouldn't have to go manually do all this stuff. And so we just kind of rethought the process in a lot of different ways. Sourcing, the idea you've got to connect to everybody's API is ridiculous. Like, you got to connect to Zillow's API. You got to connect to Realtor.com's API to have your leads come into the system. And every time they change their API, it stops working. That's ridiculous. So we created it where you could just create a unique source in your system for that source. Zillow or tomorrow, bestleadsever.com comes out. You could create the source. It's going to give you a unique email based on that source. You put that in the back end of the system, right, and it automatically formats into your system and sources it. No API required. Like, that's the kind of stuff that we not only were rethinking, but we're always rethinking now and saying, what else can we do? And the point is, it gave me control, because when you're dealing with our students and others and whatever, and we're giving them this system and then other people are purchasing it, again, it's one thing when I notice something changing in the industry. You know, for example, all of our campaigns, my follow-ups are all built into there, right? I'm not going to the CEO of another company saying, hey, we need to change this. Hey, can we do, I'm logging right on and changing it. I'm walking down the hall telling developers, here's what we need to do. It gives me control, and it really, it feeds and it supports what we're doing from a coaching and training perspective. It allows us to kind of like serve the whole person. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
Not just that one, you know, coaching side. Allows us to serve their whole business. We have marketing reps that help them market, do their social marketing for them, write their blogs for them, we're taking over the whole thing so that we can have more control over that and really help people.
That's great. I mean, let me ask you a question though. There's a lot of, I mean, what do you think the need is? You're talking about a CRM, you're talking about how it works. Yep. Is there a need, and does yours have any AI involved as far as artificial intelligence, et cetera, as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, I mean, there's some, I mean, it's still kind of debatable. I think every time we come out with a new technology, we just jump on it because we don't want to be wrong. We don't want to be late. We don't want to be, so there's a lot of, you know, AI stuff right now from the perspective of like web chat and that kind of stuff. There's AI from where I really do love AI is from the perspective of like when something comes in and it's telling you like, this is the person you should be contacting. But from the perspective of like live chat and those kinds of things, I'll be honest, I'm still kind of up in the air on it. Yes, it's nice that, you know, based on a response somebody gives, there's some basic responses that can be returned automatically and that kind of stuff. I still don't know if I'm fully on board with that. Like there's something about that person-to-person conversation. There's something about, you know, that's something we can't lose. Like the goal of everything we do ultimately is conversation, because conversation creates transactions. It creates closings. Okay. And so as technological as everything gets, as virtual as everything gets, as AI, we can go as far into the back to the future as we want to go. At the end of the day, it still comes back to conversation. You know, like that's ultimately what matters. And so we have the ability to build those kind of things in, build those kind of web chat tools, build those kind of, but I'm going to tell you from a training perspective, me personally, I'm not 100% sold yet. I'm really not. For that reason, I think there's something about the hard work of doing a conversation back and forth and, you know, that kind of stuff. It's just, you know, it's about not so much the full, you know, macro of the amount of work you do. It's micro of how many of those real conversations you have. Okay.
Right.
So what's more, what's going to work better? 10,000 mass emails to people or 3 real conversations? You see what I'm saying? Like that's macro, micro.
Exactly right. But the people that are thinking macro right now are going to say, well, from those 10,000 emails, you're going to get those 3 conversations.
Right.
But
right.
As my friend, coach, and buddy say, Nick Krem says, the only difference between contacts and contracts is the R, and that R stands for relationships. Right?
I've never heard that. I like that.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And it is
I like
true,
that.
Right? What's the difference?
I'm kind of mad at myself that I never thought of that one. Actually, as you're saying it, I'm a little upset with myself.
Well, I told you about Nick earlier before we went on. You got to check out Nick from.
That's a good one. That is a good one. It's very true. And by the way, I'm not anti. I think the greatest form of marketing around is still email marketing. I'm giving you an example that at the end of the day, it comes down to, like you said, those are the relationships. There's a reason why while 90+% of, you know, leads come off the internet, over 70% still work with the first person they have a conversation with. You know, you need to talk. You need to have what takes a little bit more time, the unscalable, the conversation. You need to have that ultimately if you want to close people when they're talking to 12 other professionals.
Yeah, and the way to get around that, you said, I mean, you really hit a great key. And I'm so grateful you said it was about email. Email is not dead. Email is
the number one form of marketing around still. Like it's not
the freaking glue.
Dude. So put it this way. I'm going to have next week. Is it next week? Next week, I'm going to have on my podcast. Have you ever heard of Russell Brunson?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Russell's coming on my podcast. He's probably the foremost marketer in our world right now. Right. So if you get Russell and I in a back room, or you get me and whoever, Gary V, and you get whatever, and you get us in a back room and you talk to us about marketing. Yes, it is more sexy to talk about internet marketing. It's more sexy to talk about retargeting. It's more sexy to talk about PPC. It's more sexy. Okay. Nothing drives traffic like email marketing. Like everyone's still got their emails from 15 years ago. There's people still opening their Yahoo emails. They're still opening their, whatever. When we have a training we're going to do, nothing drives traffic in the immediate like an email blast to all those people, right? And people will go, well, there's only a 20% open rate. What the heck marketing are you doing that has a 20% open rate? I would love to know. I would love to know what's coming even close to that. So it's not sexy, but it's still the number one form of marketing as far as results, email marketing. And it's where a ton of agents and just professionals in general are missing it. They're not building their database, not just from the perspective of relationships, staying in touch with your clients, that kind of stuff, but you're losing the ability to email market, which is still the number one form of marketing.
Well, I look at it this way. I mean, one of the things that I train and coach on is talking about being kind of everywhere when you can and being different in all those places. But the glue that holds it all together is the email, right? Because you've got all this information, you've got all this stuff going out there. Someone opens your email, they say, wow, that's some good stuff. Let me check this person out. And if they go online and they can't find you, I don't know how good that's going to be. The email is what got them to come look for you. So you've got, my opinion is you've got to be everywhere in order to really have that impact on the world, so to speak, on the real estate world, on the real estate market.
Right. But think of it this way. Like the only reason I can have a large coaching and training company and then start a software company, a marketing company, and have it immediately be a viable company is because I have the ability to go hit submit and put it in front of tons of people. Okay. Right. Like literally I could start an apparel company tomorrow. I could start a whatever, because when you have people's trust, and you have the ability to be direct to consumer, which is what email does, direct to consumer. No algorithm that hopes it shows up. No, direct to consumer. It gives you ultimate power. It gives you ultimate power and flexibility now and into the future.
This is some really great stuff, man. We've gone on and on with great conversation, great talk. We're approaching the hour. Me and Sekou could not come on today, but I want to ask you the question we always ask at the end.
All right.
How can I help you? How can I help you, your business? How can I help you grow? Because that's what we're all about, is helping each other. What can I do to help you?
That's always a tough question for me, man, because I legit do not think like that, like at all. Okay. So I would just tell, I would tell the people watching, the people listening, very simply, go to connectwithjared.com, follow, on all the platforms. We make it easy for you. If you have questions, I'm here to help you guys. That's a tough question. I legitimately don't think like that. I think it's been one of the secrets of my success is that in my relationships and with the people that I'm in contact with, I don't ever look at them and say like, what are they going to do for me? Or what are they going to, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think like that. So I don't know, man. I really don't know.
See, that's one of the things that I love about you is that it's not about what you can get, it's what you can give. I've always looked at relationships as give. There's always a give and take in a lot of different things. Hey, man, you know what? You want to take? I'll do the giving. I don't care. I want to thank you so much for coming on. I've got connectwithjared.com on the screen. I think, is that the best way for people to reach you? What's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, we have a website, we have coaching, we have training, we have all that kind of stuff. JaredJamesToday.com is our coaching, jarjamedia.com is our softwares and our marketing. But this is the easiest way. The reason why I really kind of promote this and I just tell people to connect is because, look, whether you ever buy anything from us or not, at the end of the day, I'm going to give you value, but I want you, if you ever do buy anything or whatever, to really be bought in, meaning that you've got to trust the voices you're listening to. One of the problems I think in today's world with so much content out there is that people are just getting confused because they're listening to so many different voices and they're listening to, icons that say the opposite things and it works for both of them. And so they're like, which one do I find? A voice that you believe in, that motivates you, that you can buy in on, whether that's me or whether that's someone else, and then use that person to help you get to where you need to be. For me, I put out a ton of content, for free for you guys. So whatever I can do to help, I'm here for you.
Well, I know the reason you came on today was to get a hat because you heard everybody tell you, you got to go on Finale's podcast and get a hat. So We got one of these hats going out. Yeah, I want to thank you so much.
All right, man. I can't wait. I can't wait to get that.
I'll send it out to you if you stay on just for 1 minute. Thank everybody for coming on, and we're going to see you all next week.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
We got some great people coming on. Thanks so much. Whoop. My buttons worked. I'll be in good shape here. Here we go.